are the polls looking like right now for this amendment in terms of whether it will pass or not?
Well, it's really, the polls have been narrowing slightly, but it looks like it's going to, the amendment is going to pass by 16 or 17 points, so pass with a very healthy margin at this point.
And this is not, people misunderstand that this amendment is not just an amendment about same-sex marriage, but it could affect people with any unions of any sort that are not marriage between a man and a woman. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I think, and to your earlier point, Wendy, I think there is a disconnect in North Carolina as to the understanding what the amendment really does. I think the polls are showing that people want to vote against it because they think that it bans gay marriage, but they also don't understand that it bans civil unions, long-standing domestic relationships between boyfriends and girlfriends and things of that nature.
Does this suggest, though, for those who are voting against, for the amendment because they are against same-sex marriage, that perhaps voters in North Carolina might be out of step with the rest of the country? We're seeing some new polls come out, including one that is a Wall Street Journal NBC poll that came out in March, where it shows that the number of people opposed to gay marriage has actually dropped to 40%, and 49% of people are in favor of gay marriage. That's almost completely flipped those numbers from 2009, seeing a steady rise there. Do you get the sense on the ground there in North Carolina that people, you know, perhaps are thinking about this issue on sort of the broader scale, Valerie?
I think so, but you know, North Carolina may be a little bit out of step with the rest of the country, but it's also it has been historically out of step with the South. It's the only southern state without such an amendment right now, and that is a point that amendment supporters make regularly. But even given that, I mean, public opinion on this subject has really softened here as well. And the House Speaker, who's a Republican, said recently, look, we don't think this will be in place 20 years from now. Public opinion is changing so quickly, but we would like to make it more difficult to change the law when and if that does happen. And
you say more difficult, and that's what a constitutional ban would do. But North Carolina already has a statute on the books that does define marriage as between a man and a woman. Is that correct?
That's correct. They haven't. There's been a statute in place for a long time, but this constitutional amendment would require that 3/5 of a future legislature approve putting another amendment on the ballot to roll back the ban. So it just makes it a lot harder because right now with just a statute, a legislature could change it, or potentially a judge could affect some change.
North Carolina is my home state. I was there recently, and it looked like on the grounds, at least from the signs that were on the road, that a huge battle had been waged there, you know, for people both for and against the amendment. And indeed, the governor coming out saying it's basically bad for business. It hurts our brand as a state. I wonder if you're seeing some of that sort of ground warfare going on now up until the final minute before people go to the polls.
And absolutely, Wendy, I'm sure you saw this when you're driving from the big towns like Raleigh or Charlotte. The vote no signs are everywhere, but as soon as you get out into the suburbs and especially the rural areas, and there are many in a traditional state like North Carolina, the vote no sentiment is very strong.